This is the show dedicated to raising up the next generation of men of faith and character. My name is Mark Stanifer. Welcome to the Next Man Up. Hey guys, welcome back once again. You know the drill. This is Mark. This is the Next Man Up show. So glad to have you with us. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by my buddy Josh. Hey man.
I'm pleased to join you.
Good to see you again. Thanks for coming back.
You know it.
So the last episode we did, we were talking about how to know whether or not your kids, or maybe even more broadly, your family is too busy.
Right.
And the further we got into that, the more we realized that there's probably more to tease out around busyness. And so I think that's where we're headed today.
Yeah, like as we were talking, it kind of occurred to us that the busyness is not the problem, it's the symptom.
That's right.
So what is the root cause of being busy all the time? I mean, it's like the American ideal, I guess, to always answer the question, how are you with busy?
It's certainly the default.
For sure. I mean, like it's the knee-jerk reaction.
That's right.
So why is it that we have that weird, almost psychosis thing going on that if we're not busy, then something's wrong with us?
So one man's opinion, and you can react to this, but I think a lot of it has to do with fear.
Fear?
Yeah, I know it sounds weird, right? Like we usually, for me, fear usually is in the form of snakes or being really high. And both of those are legit phobias. But I think this has to do with fear.
Okay. So fear of what? I mean, why would you be, what would you feel, why would you suddenly create a bunch of busyness to mask over fear? Like how would fear motivate you to become busy?
I know, it's a good question. And I think a lot of this rolls from how much fear really motivates us in our daily lives. And maybe that alone is another podcast episode that we can tee up. But I think the reason why, I think there's a handful of reasons why I'm pointing to fear here. So maybe we can just kind of begin to tick some of these off.
Okay.
How about FOMO?
Fear of missing out?
Fear of missing out. How often do you think we are doing things that keep us busy because we're afraid of missing out on that thing?
Well, I mean, there's legitimacy to fear of missing out. Like some things happen only once, and if we don't get it then we'll never get it again, right?
That's right.
So, like this morning, my son literally served me a play food waffle. You know, I'm sitting on my couch, I'm reading, and he comes up and offers me a play waffle. Now,
yep,
that's at some point he's going to stop doing that, and I don't want to miss out on that opportunity to engage him in this, you know, fantasy thing that he's doing with food. Like he loves the whole chef kitchen thing. Like, and at some point he's going to stop doing that. At least stop doing it as a pretend thing and actually do it as a real thing, which is a whole other can of worms. That's a whole other problem that I have to deal with then. But I don't want to miss out on this now. So there's like some legitimacy to FOMO, but you're talking about something else, right? Like you're talking about illegitimate FOMO. So
it's a great distinction because some of those things only come around once, or by the time you realize they're not happening anymore, you've already missed out, right? So it's maybe a better way to say it, or a more succinct way of saying it, is the fear of missing out on things that in the end don't really matter.
So it's a tyranny of the urgent thing instead of response towards, or responsibility towards, the important.
So we can't do everything.
Right.
Despite our desires or our delusion, we can't do it all. And so we have to choose.
But Mark, I want to do it all.
I know, but time is a limited resource. One of the things that I've talked to my kids about is learning to budget. Now, when you hear the word budget, what automatically comes to mind?
Money.
That's right. Have you ever thought about it from the standpoint of budgeting your time?
I mean, yeah, but that's not how I usually think about budgeting.
That's right. The reason why we do a budget is because we have a limited resource of, say, money, correct?
Right.
Now, we have calendars. We talked about the last time. Calendar tools are great today. If you want to do something, if you want to get something done, put it on your calendar, right?
Yeah.
But when you think about time from the perspective of it's a limited resource and you have to budget your time, then you begin to think about, okay, what are the most important things for me to invest this limited resource, to give my attention to during this period of hours or minutes or days or whatever? It forces you to choose because you can't do it all.
So how does that relate to fear of missing out?
So I think the fear of missing out is this insecurity we have about not being at the thing, not participating at the event, not doing the activity. And we're talking about this in the context of individuals or in the family or dads, right? But it could also be in the context of the marketplace or in your profession. It's recognizing that just because you can be at something doesn't mean it's the best thing for you to be at, and letting go of that insecurity of not being there. So, let me say it this way. Saying yes to the things that really matter so you don't have to be concerned about missing out on the lesser things.
So relating back to the Are Your Kids Too Busy article and podcast episode that we just released recently, it seems like we also need to teach our kids about the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And how to budget their time as well, and how to help them budget, maybe even on their behalf, especially if they're young.
Yeah, that's right. And I like the distinction you made, because to your point, FOMO can be a beneficial thing. I don't want to miss this important thing because I know if I do, I won't get it back. So there can be a positive reinforcement of FOMO, but I think too often we are so busy because of the negative side of FOMO, missing out on things that really in the end, they don't matter.
Do you have some examples of things that don't matter?
Yeah, so just off the top of my head, here's a couple different examples, maybe different extremes. So one could be that entertainment thing that you want to consume.
So like opening night of Star Wars.
Opening night of Star Wars. Or even a little simpler, like episode 3 of series 2 of the show that you're watching, whatever that show is, right?
So maybe postponing the episode is worthwhile to do something that's actually important.
To do something that matters relationally, connectively, as a dad, engaging, right? Not just checking out. And often our busyness really is downtime, entertainment time, media consumption time. We could also talk about putting the phone down, letting go of social media, and the hook that's constantly the hook that is constantly for us. So one example there. Another example could be what might sound like beneficial activity, but in the end is really fear of missing out. How about some charity that you're working for, some volunteering that you're doing? It's noble. It comes from a place of good intent, or at least it could. But what if it is conflicting with other more important things at home? What if you're serving the kids in the community more than you're serving your kids at home?
So you're sacrificing your family on the altar of ministry, I think would be a way that I've heard
another way to say it.
Spoken before.
That's right. And why is that? It could be that there's this fear of missing out on doing good or a noble activity, and it's misplaced by missing the opportunity to serve those that are closer to you, serve those that are at home.
Okay, so the fear of missing out. I mean, the opposite thing is the fear of saying no. So if you're like afraid of missing out, you're not going to say no. But the opposite problem is a fear of saying no.
Yeah. So when it's funny, I don't know what the first word your son learned was, but clearly in the top 10 of words that kids learn early on, it's no.
Yeah, my son learned yeah. That was his first word. Yeah, but I think his second was no.
Right. It's an easy word to pronounce in the English language and in Spanish and many other languages. And it's early on in the development of kids' vocabulary, they learn to say no, right? But somewhere along the line, we forget to use the word no, in some cases because we fear the consequences.
So consequences like what people will think of me,
That's
or
right.
consequences of, I mean, maybe this is more like fear of missing out than I thought. Like
They're
saying
related.
no, that you'll never be able to do the thing again,
Right.
or the fear of saying no because you'll look bad.
That's right. I think a lot of this one. So we may have covered part of it without saying it in the FOMO point. I think a lot of this one is, what will they think of me? If I say no to this, what will that do to a relationship? What will that do to the perception that others have of me? What will they think of me? Back to that insecurity. And maybe the alternative way to look at it is this. If you don't ever say no, then you're essentially saying yes to everything. So rather than saying yes to everything, say yes to the important things, which then can make it easier to say no to those things that don't fit into those core values or those important things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's still the fear thing, though. Does it get easier to say no as you go on?
It has for me.
Okay.
Part of the way I have incorporated no into my life is this. If I don't say no, it never gives somebody else an opportunity to say yes.
So you're almost like crowding out other people's opportunities to say yes to things.
That's right. And I applied that often in the church context.
Yeah. Definitely.
Right? Like you know the guys or the ladies that are always the go-to when you need something.
Oh, I've been that person.
Right. So in that context, I would say, if I don't ever say no, it doesn't provide someone else with an opportunity to say yes. So that's how early on I navigated through that. I would say that my understanding of this has evolved a little bit to be like, I'm clear on what I want to say yes to. And if it doesn't rise to that standard, then it's a no. And I'm okay with that because I know what I'm saying yes to. I'm not afraid to say no. I mostly don't care what people think, right? That's not always. But because I know what I'm saying yes to, it allows me to let go of the fear of saying no and whatever entanglements that might come with.
Okay, so it sounds like in the process of being okay with saying no, you've decided that you're enough because you've decided that you're enough.
Yeah.
That you're not concerned. I heard you say that you're not concerned about what people think about you
On a good day.
saying no. For them,
Yeah.
more often than not.
Not perfect, but progressing.
Do you think that's a common fear of like that you're not enough?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. I've used the word insecurity a couple of times.
Okay.
But I think that's a good way to say it, Josh. This idea that if I'm not busy, if I'm not doing, then I'm not enough. Like my value, my worth comes in the things that I'm doing. Again, my mind goes back to that ministry context, whether it's church, parachurch, volunteering, whatever. There's so much busyness that happens in that context. And I think, unfortunately, the underlying root cause can often be, if I'm not doing, then I'm not enough.
We've talked a lot about being really busy and being afraid of missing out and
As the reasons why, right? Not the busyness is the symptom. The underlying root cause is rooted in fear.
In the fear. And it seems as though the fear is that we don't have any worth or we don't have any value unless we're doing stuff.
Yeah.
And I've heard it said that we're human beings, not human doings, that we aren't here in order to get stuff done. We're here to enjoy life. Does that sound familiar to you?
Oh, totally familiar and completely foreign at the same time.
Okay.
Right? Because look around our culture. Value and worth is often ascribed to the accomplishments, the things that are done. Even the roles that we play, we put we're kind of getting into now identity, but we put especially as guys, we put our identity in the roles that we play.
So it's almost as though the more often we run without margin, the closer we are to the edge of our capacity, the better men we are.
I like that word margin. I use that a lot. And I think what you just said is the myth, is the illusion, is the lie. Maybe I could be so bold as to say that is the lie. And a lot of it comes back to this fear of, if I'm not doing something, then I'm not enough. And I'm not advocating doing nothing. Hear me here. I'm saying that busyness as a symptom can be from this root cause of not realizing that you are enough regardless of what you do.
So in the first article, we were talking about how to know if your kids are too busy,
Yeah.
which sheds some light on whether or not you know whether you're too busy.
Yeah.
And then we're in the middle of talking about, that's what the symptoms are, and now we're talking about what the actual root cause is, which is fear. So we can see what the symptoms are. We can go back to the root cause of fear. What's the cure? How do we move away from fear into something that's positive in the way that we make our decisions and how we fill our time?
Yeah. So we don't always bring Jesus into the context of this discussion, right? Mm-hmm. But his influence and the relationship that we are developing is front and center for you and I both in how we live our lives. And so let me pull an example from Jesus's life. Mm-hmm. He spends 30 years as a typical Palestinian Jewish male.
Right.
Working with his hands, interacting, celebrating, right? Like living as a human being.
Right. He was like a carpenter, and that was what he was known as.
That's right. And there's this crazy wild dude named John, who we refer to now as John the Baptist, who God sent as the messenger ahead of Jesus. And John's hanging out at the Jordan River, baptizing people, preparing the way, executing his mission. He's doing his thing, right? He's fulfilling his calling.
Yeah.
Jesus wanders out of the hills, and John says, that's the guy that I have come to announce and proclaim. Jesus wanders down to be baptized by John. And God the Father in that moment does something that I think is extremely pivotal, extremely crucial. Now, Jesus had not done nothing up to that point. There's just no recorded ministry work yet.
It was nothing that was public.
Nothing that was public. And God the Father said, "This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased." The Mark translation, if I'm hearing it in my own ears, God says this, "That's my boy, and I'm proud of him."
Before he's done anything else.
Before he's done anything else. What if that is God the Father's perspective for all of us? That's my boy, Josh Wilson. That's my boy, Mark Stanifer, and I'm proud of him. When that begins to settle in as truth in our hearts and our soul, it's a game changer.
It changes the entire way that you make decisions and what you say yes and no to. It sounds like it comes out of a place of purpose and out of a place of trying to prove yourself.
It comes from a place of security then in your your position with the eternal and holy Father.
It's a much better place to start.
It's a much better place to start. And I think you and I had this conversation before we turned the mics on, just the influence that fear has in our lives, that we just don't realize it. We don't understand it. We don't have a perspective of how much even Jesus followers live out of this sense of fear, when we can live out of the abundance and the security of God's love for us and who he believes us and says us to be.
Yeah, and who he's made us to be.
That's right. When we can live out of that place, it's a game changer. We're trading insecurity and fear for security of our being, and then from there the doing can flow.
So the cure to busyness is to eradicate fear. That sound about right?
That sounds about right. And
Okay.
I think for me, that's going to be a lifelong journey.
I think it's going to be for most of us.
I think so too. But speaking for me in particular, that's a lifelong journey, and it's one that I'm willing to commit to.
All right.
Well, listeners, I don't know how this conversation found you today, but I challenge you to look at your relationship with the word busy, your relationship with your calendar, how you describe and relate to your busyness. And if you are the typical American male, you're pretty busy. So getting past the symptom to the underlying root cause will shed a lot of light on why it is that we embrace this thing of busyness, why it can be so detrimental to our souls and to our development, and why letting that go and replacing it with something better, something from the Father, something more eternal and life and soul giving, can be so much better. That's the challenge for you guys today. As always, thank you for listening in. Once again, we appreciate you more than you know, and we would love to hear from you. Feedback at thenextmanup.com is where we live. You can also, if you are interested in going deeper into this community, you can check out our Facebook page and even join our private Facebook group just for dads who want to be and raise up healthy and godly men. You can find us on Facebook at NMU Journey, and our private group is NMU Dads. We would love to have you be part of the community and grow with us. Josh, thanks once again for doing what you do and for being my partner in this.
Always a pleasure.
Listeners, we will be back next week. As always, until then,
Adios.
Hey, listeners, thanks for journeying with us on this Next Man Up podcast. You know, we would love to hear from you. Maybe you have a question or an idea, perhaps a topic for us to consider. If that's you and you want to reach out to us, you can get us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. That's feedback@thenextmanup.com. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you later.